Hey everyone, my name's Arjun, and today I'm going to be showing everyone 12 of Paul Morphy's greatest games. For those of you who don't know, Paul Morphy lived in the 1800s, and he's considered by many to be one of the first unofficial world champions. And he was regularly beating some of the best players of his time, such as Paulsen, Adolf, Anderssen, and many others. So without further ado, let's begin. The first game I'm going to show today was played between James McConnell, who had white, and Morphy, who was playing with black. So McConnell began e4, e5, f4, and here Morphy played what's considered by many to be the most testing line against the king's gambit. E takes f4, knight f3, and now g5. So g5 is one of the most popular moves. It's also considered to be one of the best. A few other common moves include moves like d6, as well as d5, which is a move I personally like. Anyway, Morphy played g5, and now white played bishop to c4, one of the most popular moves again. Another option here is to play h4, immediately trying to undermine the pawn structure. After bishop to c4, black played bishop g7, just developing, and now white played d3, which is probably not such a good move. In this position, a good move here is to play d4, simply taking the whole center. And when you can play d4, there's really no reason to play the move d3. After d3, black played h6, and now we're in a place where there are no other games that have reached this position among masters. Morphy's already somewhat better because he has an extra pawn and a lot of kingside space here. Even though it may look like his pawns are weak, they're more solid than they may seem. White chose to castle here, knight f6, and now white played c3, another inaccuracy. And I personally don't really like this move because it doesn't exactly support d4, because the e4 pawn would hang. Also, it doesn't block this bishop's range in a significant way, which would be a normal reason to play this move. Now, black played a very interesting move here. He played the move b5, which is a move only Morphy would play. The idea behind b5 is that after bishop takes b5, as was played in the game, black can play c6. And now the idea is that soon he can play d5 and open up his queenside pieces like this. So after c6, white brought the bishop back to c4, and now black immediately played d5. So takes, and now white played queen e2. Once again, another slight inaccuracy. And the reason I don't really like this move is because the queen doesn't have such a great purpose on e2, because after bishop e6, as was played in the game, the queen isn't really doing much on the e-file anymore. Instead, a better move in this position would have been to go bishop b5, saving the bishop with tempo. Anyway, after queen e2, bishop e6, white played bishop b3, which is once again another inaccuracy. And a better move here would have been to go bishop to b5 with check, and now black can't castle for an extra move, and white has chances to continue the game. After bishop to b3, black has a nearly winning advantage, as a matter of fact. Black castled, d4, and now knight e4. And you can see that f5 and g4 are potential moves for black in the future, gaining more space and preparing a kingside attack. White played bishop c2, a good move, so black responded with f5 naturally. Knight d2, and now black played knight to c6, which in itself is not a bad move. However, in my opinion, knight d7 is slightly stronger, because the idea of knight to d7 is to eventually play knight f6 and get your knight to the kingside, which is where most of the action is currently happening. From c6, the knight can't really get over to the kingside so easily. Sure, it could go like this, but it doesn't really have much of a future from g6, in my view. Anyway, this isn't a bad move. Morphy is still doing very well here. Now, white played c4, and I'm not exactly sure why he played this move, because it simply gives away a pawn on d4. However, white was already doing pretty badly, so you can understand his attempt to complicate the position. After c4, Morphy simply played normal moves, bishop takes, and now knight takes d4. And you can see how strong Morphy's two knights are in the center of the board. This is something that happens in a lot of Morphy games. His pieces are really good, sometimes even at the cost of material, while his opponent's pieces don't seem to be doing very much in comparison. White played queen d3, saving his bishop. Now queen b6. So there's a lot of discovered check possibilities now. King h1 is essentially forced, otherwise the discovered checks would deliver mate soon. Knight c2, queen c2, and now knight f2. And after king g1, there's a common checkmating motif here that Morphy played. You can take a minute, pause the video, and see if you want to find it. Otherwise, I'll show the answer now. It's knight h3 check, king h1, and now queen g1, forcing the rook to trap the king in the corner, and now checkmate. And this is seen in a lot of puzzles, but not so frequently in games, so I think that this is a nice way to finish this first game. Game number 2, Morphy had black once again. And this time he was playing against John William Schulten. The game started off in a similar way, e4, e5, f4. But this time, instead of taking the pawn, black played d5. And now this is called the Falkbeer counter gambit. And after e takes d5, black played e4, which is not the best, but certainly playable and also a very aggressive line. After this, white played knight to c3, knight f6, d3, bishop b4, getting this bishop out, and now bishop d2. And so far, we're still looking at one of the main lines of the Falkbeer counter gambit. Nothing. This position has been seen many times in master level games. Black plays e3 here, sacrificing his extra pawn, but this is still a popular move. The idea is, after bishop takes e3, castles, white should go bishop back to d2, stopping this pin again. And now black has a lot of extra development, but he is down 2 pawns, and those two factors kind of counterbalance each other out. Morphy played the move bishop takes c3 here, which is not such a common move, but his idea was probably, after bishop takes c3, when he takes on d5 with this knight, he doesn't want to have to force a trade, because if you saw this position, he would have to trade if he took on d5. After bishop c3, white took with the pawn, the best move, and now rook e8 check was played. Bishop e2, and now bishop g4. So white still has a slight advantage, about half a pawn, similar to his advantage of having the first move, but he is behind in development. And this is a position that Morphy was often comfortable playing, where he's ahead a lot in development, or even if he's down a few pawns in material. Here, white makes his first inaccuracy of the game, and that was that he played c4. In itself, this isn't such a bad move, but his ideas behind this move aren't correct. White wants to save this d5 pawn, but this isn't the right idea for him. He needs to first save his king and not worry about material yet. Instead, a better move here would have been to go king f2, getting out of this pin, or not that pin still exists, getting out of this pin on his king, and now after something like bishop e2, knight e2, queen d5, and white has a slight advantage. Anyway, after c4, Morphy played c6, trying to elicit this trade, after which knight c6 and knight d4 are a possibility. White took the pawn, understandably, but this move is actually a losing blunder. In fact, white is already down nearly a rook, according to the engine. After knight takes c6 here, you can see that black's knight is going to get to d4, his queen can come out to b6, and really all of black's pieces have sensible squares to go on. He is down 2 pawns here, but that's not so important anymore. Now, white played the move he could have played last move, king f1, and he gets out of this one pin here. However, black has 2 good moves in this position, but one of them virtually wins the game on the spot. So I challenge you to try to find it. If you'd like, take a minute, pause the video, see if you can find it. Otherwise, I'll be showing the answer right now. The correct move is to play rook takes e2, double exclam. And the idea is, after knight takes, knight d4, taking advantage of this pin on the queen. After queen to b1, as was played in the game, bishop e2 was played. And now white has a few legal moves. He played king f2. And this actually allows a checkmate in 8 moves, which is a bit more challenging than the previous one. However, once again, I challenge you, try to find it. If you're stuck, I'll show the answer right now. The checkmate begins with knight to g4, and now there are 3 legal moves for white. King g3 loses quite quickly to knight f5 here, and now knight f2, a nice checkmate with 2 knights. If not king g3, then king e1 loses to queen h4 check, g3, and now queen e7. And these discovered checks are all impossible to stop, and mate will actually be forced in less than 2 moves. The best move as was played in the game is king g1, and now a nice sacrifice from Morphy, knight to f3 check. Takes is forced, and after queen to d4, king g2, queen f2, king h3, queen f3, king h4. Note how the white king is just being drawn out of its position. It's already on the 4th rank now. There are several moves that win here. Morphy played a nice quiet move. He played the move knight to h6, preparing potential knight f5 and also threatening this checkmate. White played queen g1, and after knight f5, king g5, queen h5, and that's checkmate. And that ended this game. In game number 3, Morphy had white against a player named A D Ayers. So the game started off with e4, e5, knight f3. No king's gambit this time. Knight c6, bishop c4, bishop c5, and now b4, the Evans gambit. Bishop takes was played, main move, c3. And now there are two options here for black, bishop a5 and bishop c5. And bishop a5 is more common, and that's what's played here. Now white goes d4, trying to break open the center. And this is kind of the main point of the Evans gambit. If you're down a pawn, you have to get quick development, otherwise you're just going to lose eventually. Black plays d6, a good move, and now queen b3. So double attacking this f7 pawn, and also taking a lead in development. This is kind of similar to the last game. Black plays queen to e7, protecting the pawn. Now d5 was played, and now knight d4 from black. Note that the knight cannot actually be captured because of this pin on the pawn. Now white plays bishop to b5, and this is Morphy's first inaccuracy of the game, because it doesn't really do anything useful. After the move c6, white simply loses time. So a better move would have been to play castles, because it gets the king out of the center. Oh wait, no, sorry. That is not a good move in this position. A better move would have been to play knight takes d4. And after e takes d4, now castles is a good move. And it gets the king out of the middle, and slight advantage for white. Anyway, after knight d4, bishop to b5, black plays c6, and now knight takes d4 is forced, because you can't save the queen and bishop at the same time. Knight takes, and now d takes c6. So black plays queen takes e4. And now we get to a really interesting position, actually. I challenge you to try to evaluate this position. What move would you play here, and who do you think is better? In reality, this position is actually just equal, because both kings are in about an equal amount of danger. There are two reasonable king moves here. King d2 doesn't seem like such a good move, because it simply brings the king closer to the center of the board. So either king d1 or king f1 must be played. King d1 was played by Morphy, but this is actually the worst of the two options. After king f1, black would play king f8, getting out of this discovery. And now, though both kings are pretty unsafe, the position is actually equal. The problem with king d1 is, of course, there's this threat of rook e1, pinning the queen. But the problem is, after a move like king f8, white's king is stuck in the center of the board, while black's king has at least some shelter. And black is somewhat better in this position. Instead, black plays a blunder, bishop g4. And the problem with this is after f3, takes. Black's idea was he hopes to win this rook. King c2. And now, the problem with playing queen h1 in this position, of course, is that c takes b7. Discovered attack and threatening this rook is good for white. So here, black played queen e4 check. And now Morphy actually made another inaccuracy here that actually makes the position completely equal once again. The best move in this position would have been to play bishop to d3. And now, after queen takes h1, white plays c takes b7. And after rook b8, queen a4, white wins this bishop. And we can see that white is actually about equal in material. He has two bishops for a rook and two pawns. But in general, the two bishops are better than a rook and two pawns. And also, black's king is just so unsafe, while meanwhile, white's king can be protected by all of his pieces over here. So white would actually be winning if he had played this continuation. Instead, from this position, white played king to b2. And the problem with this is, move is that after b takes c6, black is doing all right. And the idea is, if white plays something like rook to e1 here, and tries to take this pawn, we can do a quick material count. We'll see white has a bishop for 3 pawns, but black's king isn't in so much danger anymore, and black has a slight advantage in this position. Instead, from here, black played another inaccuracy, and after this, Morphy did not relinquish his advantage. Black played bishop takes c3, and the problem with this is that after knight takes c3, d takes c3, queen takes c3, there's too many threats on black. There's this threat here, still this discovered attack looms, plus c takes b7 and c7 are both possibilities. Black tries to play queenside castles, But now, after the simple rook e1, queen d5, c takes, king takes, black's king is just so exposed now. Morphy played rook to b1, the idea being that, of course, if queen takes, king a1 and the queen is pinned. Black played knight f6, and now Morphy finished off the game pretty quickly. Bishop c6, a nice tactic. Queen takes, king a1, queen c7, king c7, and now he played queen a5, king c8, queen a7. So, of course, there's the mate threat here. Black has to stop that threat, and now bishop d2. And the computer actually claims a mate in 9 moves, but there are several ways to win this game. Pinning the queen, mating with these other arrows, so black accordingly resigned. Game 4 was played between Morphy and Adolf Anderssen, who's considered to be one of the greatest players of that time besides Morphy. It started off with e4, c5, knight f3, knight c6, d4, takes, e6, knight to b5, d6, bishop f4. And this is the Sicilian defense Taimanov variation, and it's still popular these days at the top level. Here, black plays e5, a popular move, bishop e3, and now black played his first inaccuracy. He played f5 here, which is an interesting choice. The most common move here is to play knight f6, continuing development normally. After f5, there's actually only one way to maintain a decent advantage, and I challenge you to try to find the move. The move is knight 1 to c3. Morphy doesn't have to worry about the f5 pawn, he just needs to continue the development. Now black plays f4, presumably the point of his previous move. And once again, white only has one way to continue his advantage, and that is to play the move knight to d5, taking advantage of this weak c7 square and the fact that black hasn't been developing his pieces. Black plays f takes e3, the only logical continuation. Knight takes, and now king f7, now queen f3. And this actually brings the position back to equal. It's Morphy's first inaccuracy this game. The best way to continue was actually to play knight takes a8. And soon enough, the knight is going to get back to c7 and escape, after which white will just be up in exchange. From here, after queen f3, the problem is knight d4 is always looming in some positions. And that knight move with tempo is a problem. After knight to f6, white plays bishop c4, and now knight d4, exclam. The position remains equal. White plays knight takes f6, taking advantage of this bishop positioning. However, after the move d5, bishop takes d5, this chaotic position actually remains completely equal. After the move king e7, if white tries queen to h5, then black can play g takes f6. And we do a material count, black is up a bishop for a pawn, but he's not going to be mated. And if we look at the sample continuation, queen f7, king d6, knight a8, knight takes c2, king e2, and now something like knight back to d4, this chaotic position actually is equal. That all the imbalances cancel one another out. However, going back to move 14, that's not what Anderssen played. Instead, he played the move king to g6, which loses the game now. White actually forced resignation in only 3 moves. So I challenge you, can you find what moves Morphy played from here? Take a minute and pause the video if you'd like. Morphy played queen to h5 check, and after king takes f6, he played the nice move f takes e3. Note that castles, or just the simple rook f1, adds another attacker into the game, and black's king is just running around with nowhere to go. After knight takes c2 played in the game, white played king e2, and now black resigned. If we look at a sample continuation, for example, if queen takes c7, note that this would win the queen. Instead, if black tries to take this, there's actually a quick forced mate here, like this, pushing the king all the way to the other side of the board. But, of course, seeing all these possible continuations, black resigned after king to e2 on move 17. The next game was played between the same 2 players, Morphy and Anderssen, and Morphy once again had white. This time, they entered a king's gambit, and Anderssen played the same variation as was seen in the first game, between Morphy and McConnell. G5. Morphy played H4, another common move. Now G4, knight E5, and black played a slightly rarer move. He played knight to F6. Now, knight takes G4 was played by Morphy. The most common move here is to play bishop to C4, and after D5, blocking these threats on F7, E takes D5. This is the main line, with a slight advantage for black. After knight takes G4, black played knight takes E4, D3, and now knight G3. And once again, we get to an interesting position. Black has this really strong knight on G3, but he also has a few weak pawns, and his king is definitely a bit exposed. So this position is also about equal. White plays bishop takes F4, not caring about this rook. And now after knight takes H1, the position actually remains equal. White has a lot of development and a lot of play against the black king, and black's knight is also trapped. But for the moment, black does happen to be up a full rook. White plays queen E2. After bishop E7, there's a mate in 2 potential for white. This was not played by Anderssen. Take a moment, see if you can find it. The answer is to play knight F6, taking advantage of this pin. And after king here, bishop H6 mate. Of course, Anderssen did not fall into that trap. He played queen to E7 instead. Now knight F6 was played, and king D8. And now white has another tactic in this position, but it actually does not win the game. However, it's the only move to maintain equality. So take a minute, see if you can find it. The move here is to play bishop takes C7. And after king takes C7, knight D5, this is a fork on the king and queen. However, this was how the game continued. And after king D8, knight takes, bishop takes, we can do a material count. And we see white has a queen and a pawn for a rook, bishop, and knight. And this material imbalance actually favors black slightly. However, given that this knight is kind of trapped on H1, the position remains about equal. White played queen to G4. D6 was played. Queen F4, threatening this pawn. Rook G8. And now Morphy played queen takes F7, a slight inaccuracy. A better move here is to play bishop to E2, just developing his pieces. After queen F7, bishop H4. And this is the first new position of the game, the first position that has not yet been seen among master level games. After bishop H4, white played king to D2, and rook E8. Potentially bishop E1 is a threat. Knight A3, knight A6. And now this is an error from Anderssen that gives Morphy the upper hand. There are several moves that are good here for white. The best one here is to play queen to F4. And after bishop E7, rook E1, you can see that white's pieces are all doing pretty well. Black's knight isn't too relevant on A6. Well, this knight can go to B5 or C4, and black has not yet developed his queenside. Morphy did not choose this. Instead, he played queen to H5, which is not quite as good as the other move. After bishop F6, which was played, white played queen takes H1, and now black played bishop takes B2, a seemingly natural move, but this actually loses on the spot, and this was the losing mistake. Instead, black could have tried bishop to G5, after king C3, bishop to D7, but white still has a decent advantage because of his extra material. White's king is definitely weaker than black's, but since white has extra material, he's still doing well. Instead, bishop B2 loses. The problem with bishop B2 is white played queen to H4, and now after king D7, rook B1, bishop A3, white has this nice tactic, queen to A4, winning back the piece. And that was the original problem with playing bishop takes B2. After queen to H4, the bishop will not be able to take the knight because of this tactic. So, after queen to A4, black resigned, because after king D8, queen takes A3, we do a material count. White is up a queen for a rook and knight, which might not seem like such a huge material advantage. However, in a position like this, where black's king is exposed, and also he hasn't developed many of his pieces, this will prove decisive, ultimately, between two good players. So, black resigned. The sixth game was played between Louis Paulsen, another great player from the time, and Paul Morphy, and Morphy had black. e4, e5. So this is the 4 knights. And now black played bishop c5, which is not the most common move, but certainly not a bad move. Castles, castles. And now white played knight takes e5, the most popular move. And this does not immediately give away a knight, because after knight takes d4, white is forking these two pieces. After bishop d6 takes, the position remains about equal. After knight takes e5, as was played in the game, Morphy played an interesting alternative. He played rook to e8, sacrificing the pawn for some extra development. So Paulsen played the natural knight takes c6, but this actually gives Morphy a slight advantage. A better move would have been to play knight to f3, simply retreating the knight. And if Morphy tries to take back this knight, take back this pawn, then Morphy's rook isn't doing too great on e4, and also white will have some tempo to get his pieces out. And white is a little bit better here. The problem with knight takes c6 is after d takes c6, Morphy's going to get this bishop out really quickly, and this outweighs the cost of a pawn. Bishop c4 is slightly inaccurate. A better place to put the bishop would have been on e2, where this bishop g4 and knight to g4 threats are stopped. However, Morphy returns the favor on his next move. He plays the move b5, which attempts to gain queenside space, but it just forces the bishop back to e2, which was already a better square for it. Instead, Morphy should have played knight to g4, preparing threats on h2 and f2, and he's doing pretty well in this position. After b5, bishop e2, Morphy took back his pawn. Now material is equal. White plays bishop f3, rook e6, c3. So both sides are playing pretty well now. White, of course, wants to go d4 next move. So Morphy plays queen to d3, which is a nice idea. It stops his pawn from advancing, and also makes it hard to develop the queen side. Here, white begins to go astray. He plays b4. And the problem with b4 is that it pushes the bishop back to what could be a better square. And it also tries to gain space on the queen side, but is really just creating weaknesses. Morphy played bishop to b6. A slightly better move would have been to play bishop d6, aiming towards the king side. After bishop b6, a4 was played. And white continues to play on the queen side, but this isn't the right idea. After takes, black played one more inaccuracy, his last one of the game, bishop to d7. And the problem with this is that it allows queen a6, threatening this queen, and if the queen tries to retreat, then white can go d4, and he's doing fine here. Thus, a better move would have been to go bishop to b7, stopping that. After bishop d7, white played his final mistake, rook to a2, and now Morphy kept the advantage. Black played rook e8, putting his rook into the battle, and now Morphy has a big threat in this position. So I challenge you, can you find his threat? The winning move, if it were Morphy's turn, would have been to play queen takes f1, followed by rook to e1, checkmate. So white stopped that. But now it allows an incredible move from Morphy. So I challenge you, can you find it? Take a minute and pause the video if you'd like. I'm now going to reveal the answer. The winning move is queen takes f3. And after g takes f3, rook g6, king h1, black goes bishop h3. Now after bishop g2, king g1, there's going to be a type of windmill tactic. After rook d1, black played bishop g2, king g1. And now, if you imagine that white cooperated for a second, black could simply check like this, and take all of white's pieces like this. However, this wasn't exactly what happened in the game. After rook d1, bishop g2, king g1, bishop f3, king f1. And now black has a forced checkmate in 4 moves here. So I challenge you to try to find it. The winning move here is to play rook to g2, and now white actually has no good options here. If you play something like queen a4, simply rook takes f2, king g1, rook g2, and now something like this. Morphy did not play that move, but he played a different winning move. He played bishop to g2, repeating moves once, king to g1, bishop h3. Now after king h1, he played bishop takes f2, threatening this checkmate. This move was forced to stop mate, So takes, takes, and now rook e2. So black's rooks are either going to give checkmate or they're going to win a lot of material. White tried rook a1, but after rook h6, d4, bishop e3, this mate is coming, and the only way to stop it is to play rook f2. Accordingly, white resigned. The next game was played between Paul Morphy with white and Thomas Herbert Worrall with black. And as you can see, white actually gave knight odds in this game. We started off with another king's gambit, and black plays what would be a main line if Morphy did have his queenside knight. But maybe it's not the best choice in an odds game, because in an odds game, it's up to the person giving the odds to win the game. Black doesn't need to make the position tactical. If he just maintains his advantage, he'll end up winning. Either way, white plays bishop c4, now g4, and now white sacrifices a knight. After g takes f3, castles, black plays a slight inaccuracy, bishop h6, and the problem with this is that he's trying to hold on to his f4 pawn, which isn't the right way to play. It would have been better to play a move like bishop g7. Now queen takes f3 was played, and now black plays a move that actually throws away his whole opening advantage, knight c6, and the position is actually almost equal now. Morphy plays a nice sacrifice here. You can take a moment, try to find it if you'd like. The move was bishop takes f7, opening up the king even further. Now, the best way to refute any sacrifice is to try to accept it, like black did with king takes f7. Now, queen h5 was played, king g7, and bishop takes f4. So, and once Morphy brings all of his pieces out, black won't have any more advantage because his king is just so unsafe. Black took back on f4, rook takes f4, knight h6, stopping these threats on f7. And now rook a to f1. So this move is completely fine. The position is still about equal. Morphy could have forced a draw here if he would have wanted with rook to g4. And after this, there's simply no way for black to escape all the checks. So this would have been a draw had Morphy wanted it. However, he was most likely trying to win this game. So he played rook a to f1, and now queen e8, stopping any more potential threats on f7. Queen h4, and now d6. And this is a slight mistake again. It gives white the advantage. The best move would have been to play something like queen g6, stopping the queen f6 idea. d6 was played, and now after queen f6, king g8, queen h6, Morphy has one of his pieces back. Black plays the move bishop d7 here, which allows a checkmate in 5 moves from white. The better move would have been to play something like bishop e6. And now after d5, white is going to win another piece back. And this position is really good for white because he has so much piece activity, and he's only going to be down 1 piece at the end of this exchange. I challenge you, can you find the mate in 5 here? You can take a minute, pause if you'd like. I'll reveal the answer now. The correct move would have been to play rook f8 check. And after queen takes, queen g5, queen g7 is forced. Now here, black interposes with all of his pieces, but ultimately falls prey to mate. In the game, however, Morphy missed this move. He played rook 4 to f3. He still has an advantage, but it's not completely winning yet. Black brought his knight back to e7, and now h4. So he wants to bring this pawn to h5 and attack this knight when it comes to g6, like this. Black played bishop g4, takes here, and now takes on g6. But this allows a checkmate in 3 moves. So if you'd like, you can try to find it. The move was rook to f8. And after taking these, white has a nice checkmate like this. Black's rooks are actually what's stopping his king from getting out of the mate. The next game, Morphy had black, and he was playing against Napoleon Marache. So white started with e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, and b4. So another Evans gambit. Takes on b4, c3, bishop a5, the main line once again, d4 takes. And now white plays e5, deviating from theory. And this isn't the right time to try to gain space in the center, because white needs to somehow find compensation for being down a pawn. After e5, black played d5, the best move, countering in the center. Takes on d6, takes, castles, and now knight e7, stopping any stopping any potential threats on the e-file. Knight g5 was played, and now after castles, note that there aren't really any big threats on f7, and Morphy's leading development is crushing. Note that in this exact position, he's actually up 2 pawns plus development, and his pieces are actually doing better. So he really has all the possible advantages in this position. White played bishop d3. Morphy stopped the threat with bishop f5. Takes, takes, and now note that white only has 1 piece that's been developed, and even that might become a target soon. Bishop a3 was played, trying to win this rook, and after queen g6, white took the rook, but now note that he has, once again, only 1 developed piece, and that piece is doing something on f8. I don't really know what. White tried to save his piece, but now black gets his 3rd pawn, and now he has a knight and 3 pawns for a rook, which is an overwhelming material advantage. White tried bishop c1, hoping to reroute the bishop, but now you notice actually none of white's pieces have even come off the back rank, and all of his remaining pawns are on their original squares. Meanwhile, Morphy only really has 1 piece that's not doing well. Well, maybe 2 if you include this bishop on a5, and even those are going to get into the game soon. White developed with bishop to f4, rook d8 getting his rook into the game, queen c2, and now knight c to d4. So this knight is headed for f3 now, where it cannot be captured. White plays queen to e4, and now there's a tactic for Morphy here. I challenge you, can you find it? You can take a second and pause the video if you'd like. I'm going to show the answer now. The move is knight to g3, and the point is, if something like queen g6, which is the normal response, black has this nice checkmate, knight d to e2. And how often does this happen? A checkmate with 2 knights. This was actually how the game ended. If instead white tried to take, then the queen hangs, of course. So this move would won the game, and this was how it finished. This next game was played with Morphy as white against Hubert Knott, who had black. This time Morphy gave rook odds. The game started off with another king's gambit, and the same line with g5. Morphy developed quickly, and quick development is of the essence when you're down material. So Morphy's intentions are clear. He needs to either give checkmate, or he'll lose eventually, being down a rook. g4 is played, and now d4. And really, there's 2 possible outcomes to this game. Either white mates black with his extra development, or black survives and eventually wins with his extra material. Takes on f3, castles, and now d5. And this is a good move from black, one of the best in the position. And instead of trying to hold on to his material, he's focusing on development. After all, he is already up a rook, knight, and pawn, so he can afford to lose a few pieces. Takes on d5, bishop to g4, queen d3, now takes on g2. So now Morphy played rook to f2, and I'm not exactly sure why he didn't play rook f4. Possibly it's because he didn't really see what to continue after bishop h5. Either way, after rook f2, black played c6, and now white sacrificed yet another piece. So now after king takes, if we do a material count, we see black is up a rook, bishop, and knight. That's 11 points, which is a lot. White takes on f4. Now there's some possibilities of discovered checks, but black just plays knight f6, stopping them. And so far, black has actually played really well this game. He hasn't made any serious mistakes, and he has a huge material advantage, and his king is not about to get checkmated. And the evaluation is actually nearly plus 10 for him. e5 was played by white, hoping to get the knight out of the way. Black just defends it with his other one. Knight c3 is played, bishop g7, knight e4, and now black played h6, which gives away some of his advantage, because knight to g5 isn't such a big threat in this position. Perhaps black calculated this following line: knight e4, bishop g5, knight f2, queen b3, and now bishop d8. And he saw after rook takes d8 that he is technically down a queen, but you'll notice that black has 2 rooks, 2 bishops, and 2 knights for the queen. So this is, of course, a winning advantage. Regardless, black still has a winning advantage after h6, but it's just not as good as it had been earlier. White took on f6, knight takes f6, Now bishop e5, and Morphy's pieces are suddenly coming to life. This rook, knight, and queen are all in the game. Black played rook f8, and now the position is once again close to equal. Knight takes f6, bishop f6, and bishop f6. And black is still up a rook, but now there's some more real possibilities of discovered checks. Queen to d7, and now white has a tricky immediate win. So I challenge you, you can try to find it. Morphy did not actually find it. He played the move queen to h7. Instead, I challenge you, can you find this win? You can take a minute and pause if you'd like. The winning move was d5. Now the idea is, if black simply takes back, bishop to c3, and after king e8, queen g6, mate will come soon. Instead, if black just does nothing, say he plays like a6, queen to e4, and black is going to be mated in a few moves. If black tries to run away, then queen g6, rook f7, and now bishop g5, and queen g8 is going to come soon with a crushing position. So this move would have won. Instead, white played queen h7, king e8 followed, queen g6 is played, rook f7, and now bishop g5. And Morphy is still using this pin on the rook, but it's not as strong as it would have been in the previous line. In this position, black panicked. He played the move bishop to f3, which simply gives away a bishop here, and I'm not exactly sure why he would have played this move. Instead, black could have tried a move like queen to f5, sacrificing his queen, but white cannot actually deliver checkmate. If he tries to do this, there's no immediate checkmate in this position. Either way, black played bishop f3, and after rook takes f3, Morphy did not throw away his advantage. He played rook e3 check, bishop h6, rook g7, and mate is coming soon. Bishop takes, queen takes, and now Morphy decided to win the queen. So black resigned here. Game number 10 was played between Morphy and his dad, Alonzo Morphy, and Paul had white in this position, giving his father rook odds. Start off with e4, e5, the two knights defense. And in this position, when white does have a rook, the main move is to go knight a5, and there are a lot of interesting possibilities after this position. However, in this, black played knight takes d5. And normally this is a bad position because white has this interesting sacrifice, knight takes f7. However, given that white is missing his rook on a1, this is still a winning position for black. This was what happened in the game, and after knight to c3, black decided to give away his knight. After bishop takes d5, king d6, the knight can potentially retreat to e6, protecting the king some more. And black still has a good position, given that he won white's knight on f7 earlier. However, it would have been better to instead not give away the knight, and play a move like knight to e7. After knight to d4, white played bishop takes d5, king d6, queen f7. And now black played the move bishop e6, which may seem like it's a fine move, but white has actually attained equality now. So a better way to play would have been queen e7, hoping for a queen trade. Of course, any queen trade in this position would give a winning advantage to black. And if white tries knight e4, simply king d7. And black's king is somewhat safe now. Bishop e6, and now after takes knight e4, black's king is forced to run to the center of the board. A better move would have been king c6 here. After queen takes, bishop to d6. And this does give away the knight, but if we do a material count, white has a knight and a pawn for one of black's rooks. And this advantage normally gives a slight advantage to black. However, given that black's king is so unsafe, the position is slightly better for white. Alonzo Morphy, on the other hand, wanted to maintain his extra knight. But now after c4, king e4, queen e6, black's king is even closer to white's territory than to his own. Queen d4, hoping to protect the knight, or hoping to protect the king. White played queen g4, king d3, queen e2, king c2. And now d3, king takes c1. And this allows a checkmate in one move. which looks pretty nice, castles. Instead, black could have played king to b1, which would have survived a little bit longer, but after castles, these discovered checks will end the game soon, and the computer declares a mate in 8 moves. This was the real end to the game, and this is checkmate. This next game was played between Morphy with white and George Salmon with black, and this was actually a blindfolded game from Morphy. The game started off with another Evans Gambit, and this time black did not accept the Gambit, but he played d5, which is unusual, but definitely not a bad move, and it's certainly playable. E takes d5 is played, and now knight b4, and the idea is that black wants to take this pawn eventually. Castles, and now black played knight to e7. Another possibility would have played knight f6 instead, with basically the same intentions. Knight e7, knight takes e5, and now castles. A better move here is to just take back the pawn. If we do material count, material is equal, but since black's knights are a bit tied up here, white is a little bit better. Castles, d4, bishop d6, and now knight c3. And Morphy has a slight advantage, because he is up 1 pawn and his pieces are a little bit more actively placed. Black played bishop to f5, which is not the best, and a better move would have been to play c6, trying to break down white's center. And after d takes c6, bishop takes e5, and now knight takes c6. Sure, black is down a pawn, but white has this loose pawn on e5, an isolated pawn on c2 and a2, and he is a little bit worse, but not doing too badly. Bishop f5 was played in the game, though. White played bishop to b3, protecting c2. And now a5. Once again, in this position, c6 would have been a better move, trying to break down the center. a5, now a3, a4. So white took on a4, and black took on d5. So once again, if we do a material count, we'll see white is up a pawn, but his knight isn't so great on a4. White is still better, though, because he has this nice knight on e5 as well as the pawn advantage. White played c4, and now black played a nice move here. He played rook takes a4, and if white had played bishop takes a4, black goes knight to c3. After queen b3, black brings his knight to e2 and gets it to d4, where he's in the center of the board. And though black is down in exchange, or rook for a knight, since his knight is good and this knight is a bit loose, white's advantage is not nearly the full exchange. However, white is still better. Morphy did not allow that, though. He played c takes d5, which is the best move. And after rook a5, queen f3, getting the queen out. Bishop g6 was chosen by black. Now rook e1, just getting the rook out. And now bishop b4. Here, white has one move that virtually ends the game immediately. I challenge you. Can you find it? Morphy played the simple rook e2. However, this was not best. Take a minute, pause the video, see if you can find the winning move here. The winning move in this position was bishop to g5, which is crushing. After bishop takes e1, rook takes e1. When black tries to just take this, this will win the knight. And it's surprisingly hard to stop this sequence of moves from occurring. Rook e2 certainly keeps some advantage, though. Now, black played knight f5, bishop b2 protecting d4, queen a8, targeting this line and also this pawn. And now g3, queen a7. And now Morphy had one more strong move in this position, which would have been to play h4. And the idea is after bishop takes a3, white goes knight to c4. Instead of bishop takes a3, if something like knight to d6 had been played, then h5, bishop f5, and g4. And these pawns are going to come down the board. But after g3, queen a7, white just played knight takes g6. And after h takes g6, Morphy made one more inaccuracy. He played rook to e5, and now the position is actually roughly equal. The problem with this move is black can play something like knight takes d4, which would have been the best move. And after queen to d1, he gets this bishop as well. And a material count shows that material is equal, and white doesn't really have any more favorable imbalances. So the position is basically equal. Black played bishop to a3 though, and now this gives back the advantage. d6 was played by white. Note that the idea is to remove a defender of the a3 bishop. Bishop b4 takes on a5, queen d5. This pawn can push down the board, and this bishop is also double attacked. b6 was played. Now d7, queen a8, rook c1, just targeting this c7 pawn. Takes on d5, bishop takes b5. Now bishop c6, knight d6, and d5 were played. And we get into an endgame. However, this is an endgame that's definitely winning for white, because this pawn is so strong, and black's rook can never really leave the back rank, because otherwise the pawn will promote. Bishop d2 was played, rook d1, bishop g5, f4. Now bishop d8. White played bishop to a3, f5, and now rook e1. Potentially rook e8 is an idea. King f7. White took this pawn. Note that this would lose immediately due to this. Black played rook h8. I'll just go through the next few moves a bit quickly. And now Morphy's plan is pretty simple. All he has to do is really get this king to c8 somehow, and then he'll win this bishop. And there's surprisingly little that black can do about this. Black tried this, but now he was simply forced to move his rook back and forth, because if you think about it, there's not really any more logical continuations for black, as he can never take this rook due to white promoting. So eventually we got here. Black is forced to get his bishop out of the way, but then white promotes. Now, white's just going to take this pawn, followed by the other pawns, and so, of course, black resigned. The 12th and final game I have for today is between Paul Morphy and an unnamed opponent who had black. It began e4, e5, and f4, another king's gambit. And this game happened to be played in a blindfold simul, so Morphy was playing several opponents all while blindfolded. E takes f4, knight f3, and now black played c6, so presumably he wants to go d5. Knight to c3, black played bishop to b4, which kind of goes against the whole point of black's previous move. If he had wanted to attend d5, then why not play d5 in this exact position? After this, white played bishop c4, and now bishop takes c3. And this gives Morphy the opportunity to just develop his bishop and queen after g takes c3, and white's already actually much better in this position. Black played knight to e7, and now Morphy played a nice move, queen to d6, which is an excellent outpost for the queen, and it blocks the advance of this d-pawn. In general, if you can block the advance of the d-pawn in a structure like this, it makes it really hard to develop the queen side, because then it's hard to make an open line for the bishop like that. Black castled, bishop f4, knight to g6, bishop g5, queen e8, and now castles. So you can see all of white's pieces except this rook on a1 are in the game and being useful. Meanwhile, black only has one piece that is useful, and that's this knight on g6. And I don't see how these three pieces are ever going to get into the game. King h8 was played, rook e1, getting his final piece into the game, f6. And now Morphy played a nice sacrifice. By no means was this the only move, but I challenge you. Can you find it? The winning move, or one of the winning moves, was to play e5. And after f takes g5, the problem is white can go knight takes g5. And now this knight f7 threat is going to come soon. Black tries to stop it like this. White can simply go like this. And now he's double attacking this knight and will win the game. So black played f5, which is a good try. Knight d4, f4, and now e6. And this opens up even more lines. And this is a common theme throughout all of Morphy's games. If you can open up lines in your head in development, that oftentimes gives way to a winning attack. D takes e6, knight takes e6, bishop takes, and now rook takes e6. queen c8, and now white sacrifices another piece. Rook takes g6. And black has absolutely no defenders anymore. Even this rook on f8 isn't really doing much to defend the king, while white has at least 3 attackers. And this rook can easily come into the game as well. H takes, queen f5. Now white played a nice queen sacrifice here. Rook takes f4. Although several moves win, such as queen h5 as well. Rook takes, queen takes g6, virtually forced. Rook takes, king h7. Now Morphy did a quick windmill to win this queen. After king takes g6, he played bishop f4. This knight is double attacked and there's no way to protect it, so black resigned because the ensuing endgame would be easily winning. So that concludes the 12 games I have to show today. I hope you enjoyed, I hope you learned something, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.